And fado is, of course, an important part of our Portuguese culture, so it's time to be loud for culture. Kieran Koff, I will invite you back on stage, and this time you will be side by side with Christina Kessler, a member of the EGP committee and former member of the executive committee for the Young European Greens. Thank you so much. Kieran, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So welcome to our last panel, Loud for Culture. So we have the best part of an hour to talk about culture and the relationship between culture and politics. And you know, if you think about it, culture is at the heart of politics. If we think about what culture is, if we think about the language that we speak, the neighborhoods that we live in, the food we eat, the music that we listen to, that is all about culture, but it's also about our political values. And we are informed by the land, by the music, and by the food. And culture, it not only brings our communities and our countries together, it brings Europe together as well. We listened to the Ode to Joy by Beethoven earlier, and that is truly a European melody that brings us together as Europeans. But culture is everything. Culture can be digital, it can be auditory, it can be visual, it can be the heart of what we are and where we come from. So can I invite up to the stage Agnese Lāce, the Minister of Culture of Latvia and co-chair of PROGRESީVIE. She has served, more importantly, she has served as Minister of Culture of Latvia since June 2024, having previously held the position of Vice Minister for 9 months. So you are responsible for cultural policy, social cohesion, and media policy, so you're welcome. Our next speaker, Ernest Urtasun, Minister for Culture of Spain. I know Ernest because we were in the European Parliament before. So it's great to be back with you on a stage, Ernest. You're so welcome. Terry Reintke, come on stage. Co-chair of the Greens European Free Alliance group in the European Parliament, re-elected as co-chair 2 years ago. You joined the Greens IFA group in 2014 as the youngest MEP at the age of 27. You have not changed a bit. And then we have Joana Gomes, a consultant on public cultural policies. Joana, you were president of Lisbon's Municipal Cultural Agency from 2015 to 2021, and more recently this year, you were Commissioner General of Portugal at the World Expo at Osaka in Japan. How welcome you are. And then, of course, finally, Rui, come back on stage. Of course, you know Rui as a politician, but Rui, you're an historian, you are a writer, and you have written, and you are very involved with the Green European Journal, which is the voice of culture for Greens all over Europe. So you are so welcome. Christina, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much for joining us on stage, but also thank you to all of those of you who are here despite the appeal of dinner. I would ask you to keep it very succinct, because as much we enjoy talking about culture and politics, we also enjoy dinner very much. And therefore, my first question goes to Rui, to Agnese, and to Ernest. You're all politicians, green politicians, and you all, in one way or another, have worked specifically on culture. And my question is, where do you see green politics relating to culture? Ernest, maybe you can go first.
Well, green politics, well, firstly, good evening, everybody. And it's a big pleasure to be with my former colleagues at the European Parliament and with my colleagues at the European Green Family, because this is always will remain my family. Well, linking culture to green politics, well, several angles where we can tackle that. Well, firstly, we need to understand, I would say, that culture is one of the main battlefields of the defense of democracy in Europe at the moment. This is very clear, and the proof of that is that when you have the far right in power, they always try to mingle and to influence, because they know is where they can attack democracy better. And that's why defending culture is the most important thing to defend democracy nowadays in Europe. And that's why we need to be very strong on that. First. And that is the reason why the Greens, why Agnese, why with me and other colleagues before in Germany, I mean, we already knew since the beginning that we wanted to have the culture portfolios because we want to be in that battle. Secondly, while culture relates, and I'll try to be very brief, but culture relates very strongly with green issues and climate change. For two specific reasons, I'll be very brief. Firstly, because building the European society of the future that needs to adapt and mitigate climate change means a whole societal change in Europe, which is impossible to do without culture accompanying that change. So we're in the middle of a fundamental societal change, and this fundamental societal change will only be successful if culture is behind it. So that's why in Spain we have created a Biennale of culture and climate change, because we want to have common discussions around that. But secondly as well, because culture is very much related to the effects of climate change. And we have seen that now in Valencia with the catastrophic floods and the consequences in heritage, for instance. So we need to protect cultural heritage within climate change framework. And that's why we are trying in Spain to put cultural heritage in all the adaptation plans for climate change. This we need to do, we need to protect. But on the other hand, culture has to play its part in the ecological transition. And that's why, for instance, and we have discussed that in the framework of the Council as well, we have now a green book in Spain to see how cultural heritage can help developing renewables and play its part in tackling climate change. So the angles are huge where both things are interlinked.
Agnese, over to you.
I will second whatever Ernest said regarding culture playing a very strong role in protecting our democracies. And we see already now in Europe attack on culture, on cultural institutions, where culture budgets are the first ones in line to cut when we need to spend for defense, where culture ministries are sometimes given to pasta salespeople instead of professionals to undermine the role that culture plays in strengthening the very foundation of our societies. And so this is something that we've addressed at the European level, very much so at the Council, but also in our day-to-day life. I think the most important thing is to secure the working conditions for people in the culture sphere, to make sure that they feel safe, that they are supported, that they are not limited, that they're not censored, that they're not attacked for their expressions, and that every type of expression is has room in the public space. At the same time, we are also very aware that culture is instrumentalized for politics. For the longest time, the only country that had culture in its defense policy, in its national security strategy, was Russia. And we see the consequence of this. Unfortunately, we haven't realized the role that culture plays in shaping the public discourse and in shaping our resilience and empathy, actually, towards each other, so that we could cooperate and trust each other more. Regarding climate change, it's not only the role of culture in mitigating and shaping the way that we adapt to it, it's also realizing how many of our traditions and folklore are undermined because of climate crisis. Folk songs in Latvian soon will not make sense because these natural events will not take place anymore. It's realizing that it affects the very core of our identity. And of course, it is very closely linked with civic participation, with the platforms where issues are raised on a public level, what is it that we challenge? And this is, again, why the role of freedom of expression is so, so important.
How do you see the relationship between culture and green politics?
Well, thank you, Christina. I think that something very important happened here today. When we listened in the first panel to Vula, Yolanda, Luca, and Isabel speaking, what they were giving us was a blueprint of a social and economic plan that can win, that can make progressives and greens win again in Europe, persuade a majority of our fellow citizens, and produce new electoral and social victories, because we need to start talking about winning again. And when we heard Nasser and Benedetta talk about what is happening in Gaza, we heard about the other side of the coin, which is that we will only win as Greens and progressives if we are completely coherent along the lines of human rights and democracy and rule of law. The same everywhere in the world for everyone in the world, the same in Ukraine and in Gaza. If we are completely consistent on our defense of human rights, we will not have weak points for attack of our adversaries. And that has happened in a place which is a beautiful place. This house, this building, this is not by chance. Beauty is not something to have on the outside of politics. This building here also gives us a hint at the joining of cultures that have produced us, at least us here in Lisbon. You enter the building and you see our Arabic past. And here you see Romantic architecture. You have heard the magnificent ladies that were singing in this chorus that you were by my side when we entered. And that's also the power of Mediterranean music. I remember with Vula during the austerity crisis that we were always very kind of offended at this idea that the Mediterranean was the periphery. The Mediterranean has never been the periphery. It can be the center of our world if we manage to listen to our history and to see what surrounds us. So the question now is, we have heard Benedetta and Nasser tell us about Gaza. We all know that we have massacres, war crimes, and genocides in the world. And my question to you is, where is our Guernica of today? It is not because we do not have the talented artists. There is never a scarcity of talent and creativity. It's because, except from ministers like Agnese and Ernest, the culture of power today misunderstands the power of culture. Politicians listen to technocrats a lot. They listen to consultants. They talk to all kinds of, advisory companies. They do not talk to poets. They do not talk to painters. They do not talk to writers or movie makers any longer. And we need them, because if we are fighting the far right, let us go back in history. The power that the surrealists, that the Dadaists, that all these painters and writers and movie makers had to vanquish fascism, without them, we would have lost. They had the power to mock, they had the power to be satiric, they had the power to be sarcastic, they had the power to caricature. Now look at the descendants of fascists today. Look at Putin, look at Trump, look at Elon Musk. Why are people afraid of them? They are so ridiculous. They are so easy to mock. One of the main reasons why they seem so invincible is that because we have not talked to our prophets. Who are our prophets? It's the artists, it's the writers, it's the literature, the cinema, the song making that I think will inspire us back again. So, yeah. People talk a lot about political science, and I will end with this. It is a very serious topic. I have taught political science classes, so I will not mock political science. But among us here, nobody's listening, there is no political science. There are scientific attempts to think about politics, but politics is an art. It's the art of listening to people, it's the art of talking to people, it's the art of crafting a story, telling a story, and making arguments that convince people. It is an art because art is what makes us attentive to our fellow citizens and to the hints that they give us. So my plea is, I'm not advising anyone to leave their political science courses, do study political science, but think more of politics as an art. And if we think more about this, maybe we can start to have the talent, because talent is needed, the inspiration, the intuition to win.
Thank you, Rui, for that intervention. Joana, you've had an amazing year because you brought Portugal to Japan. So you brought something from a European culture into another culture. The question I wanted to ask you was, do we have to change the way we work with culture, the way we produce culture? But I'm sure Japan changed you from getting outside the European cultural experience and going to somewhere quite different. So really the question is around change. Are we doing culture right? Do we have to change? And did your experience of bringing Portuguese culture to Japan change you?
Thank you for being here tonight. Yes, there was a fundamental change in the way we approached our participation, which was that Portugal has been speaking non-stop for the last decades when it comes to Japan about the 16th century. The Portuguese were the first Westerners to arrive to Japan, and this has been our narrative all the time. So Japanese people don't really know us, who we are today. One of our symbolic, if you like, gestures was on the 5th of May, which was our national day and which is also the day of Portuguese language. We chose deliberately to invite a Portuguese artist, Dino Santiago, who is of African origin, because we wanted to show that this is who we are today. We are no longer those people of the 16th century, or we are also. But I would like to today focus on something that I thought about preparing for coming here, a revisitation of Lucrezia Martel, Argentinian movie maker. And like Rui said, we do need to listen to painters, artists, movie makers. She recently revisited the concept, culture is the most ecological way to make war. I know we are non-violent here, but we are at a war. We are in the midst of a cultural war, which we are not winning, as was said before as well. And we need to take this very, very seriously. As you said, we are at the forefront. Culture, cultural ministers, artists, everyone who is engaged within this cultural sector is at the forefront of a very serious, very violent, aggressive cultural war, where we are always trying to be discredited, calling us woke and whatnot, just for saying what is fair, what is normal. We, countries like Portugal that have a colonial past, we need to decolonize our museums and our cultural institutions. I know in Spain you are doing that. But we have to be very intelligent in doing it, because this is music to the extreme right wing's ears. They adore when we launch these initiatives because they know they will have so much to attack us about, calling us unpatriotic, ungrateful, attacking our minorities. So I think we need to do it in an aggressive way, but in an aggressive, empathic way. We can't underestimate the fears and concerns of many good people who are being drawn towards the extreme right. We need to be able to get in touch with those people in a very empathic way, which is hard sometimes with what we hear and what we see. And my last point is, as was said before, we need to stand united. We have differences within the progressive left, but we need to be very united. And we need to be absolutely intolerant. And here, I'm sorry, I do not make exceptions for freedom of speech. Intolerant with racist, xenophobic speech. This cannot happen.
Thank you, Joana, for that. Terry, you're at the heart of many culture wars in the corridors of the European Parliament. Talk to us about your experience of that. And again, a similar question of what do we need to change as we approach culture?
Well, maybe I can answer on two levels, and the first one goes into the direction that also the previous speakers have already touched upon. There is obviously in the European Parliament, in all national discussions, there is now a battle ongoing about the definition, and I think that's also what culture is, because at the end, culture is a representation of who we are as a society, as a collective. And I think that the far right extremists have for a very long time understood that without us understanding that they have very well understood that this is the core of where they need to go. And this is at the inner identity of a lot of people that they need to touch upon in order to move them from having sane debates about political issues, about what we need to do to fight climate change, to have a better economy, to defend democracy, and to move to something that is completely irrational. You can see that in Spain, actually, when you look at the debates that PP, Vox are raising on the past of Spain. You can see that in Germany very, very well with the far right, who are using certain tropes. Sometimes it's even not the exact words, but you can very clearly see the references to the Nazis, and they're touching something with that is very, very powerful, and that I believe we as progressives have underestimated for a far too long time. So for me, understanding how this is being done and how we have to stand up against it, while at the same time, I believe we have also not been good enough at using these kind of techniques or using these kind of ways of addressing people ourselves. We believed for a very long time that we have the better arguments, we have the sane arguments, we have the good arguments, and this is going to convince people in a science-based, rational debate. Brexit is the best example of it. With the Remain side believe we just have the better arguments, we are going to win it. At the end of the day, Nigel Farage won with Take Back Control, which was a purely emotional argument that he was making to a past that never existed, but people could somehow feel that. So for me, the key question of how do we have to address issues like, for example, bringing back a positive discourse of climate change, fighting climate change, is can we use culture, can we use identities of people, something that people relate to in a different way as progressives in society. And I think that we have multiple possibilities to do that. So for me, the key issue will be how can we touch upon a different way of speaking to people, addressing problems, addressing issues, using culture, if we want to win the battles that are ahead of us.
Thank you. Agnese or Ernest, would you like to touch on what needs to change in how we're promoting culture? I mean, the language obviously has to change in how we communicate the challenges that are out there.
Well, I think it's very much to what Terry said. We need we need to make sure that culture isn't monopolized by someone who says this is the right way our culture is and how it's going to develop. That's at the core of the right approach to cultural policy, right? The very kind of boxed-in processes, the very kind of straitjacket type of approach of instead of really allowing for many voices to be heard, of really allowing for creativity to be there. And it's not only about cultural policy, then, if we think about it, it's linking it with economic policy, with creative industries, with circular economy, if you will, with how we look at artificial intelligence and whether we recognize how much it threatens our cultural expressions. And Ernest has brought this up on multiple occasions at the European level as well, where we realize that many of the transformations in society are affecting culture, but can also be shaped by culture. And it's not a kind of boxed-in way that culture survives. It's something that changes all the time. And this also, for me, means that there is no room for a very straight kind of narrative regarding what cultural policy is. It's about the liberty of the sector to be able to adapt and to strive.
Thank you. It's getting late, so I think we only have a chance to maybe have one more question to a few of you. Christina.
Yes, and if you're succinct, I can even ask that question to all of you. As long as you keep yourself short, I would ask you to each give an example of where we have succeeded. I know we can talk a lot about the challenges and the struggles, but can you each give me an example of success? Rui.
Well, we have succeeded when we have created institutions that tell us a story. We have created universities, and universities have created Europe. We have created libraries, and libraries have changed the world. When I was a kid, I lived in a small village. We had no library, of course, and no bookstore. There was a van that was arriving. It was a van paid by a foundation, Gulbenkian Foundation, that exists in Portugal, and many people living in villages have had this experience. Thursday was the day when the van arrived with books, and that completely changed our life because it was a window into the possibility of a completely different world existing. It made me think about kids that were living in the other side of the world and maybe thinking the same thoughts that I was thinking. I linked that to the beginning of my reflection about politics. We can still do it. I think the European Union is still representing a very rich regional bloc. What is forbidding us from creating European libraries in all member states where people can feel Europe as a tangible project? Not just, the kind of conceptual thing, internal markets, directives, regulations. No, come on, let's build things. Let's, or maybe rebuild. We have empty buildings, lovely empty buildings in all our incredible cities. Europe is probably the place in the world where you have a greater abundance of incredible cities, from Venice to Amsterdam, from Riga to Barcelona. In all these cities, we have empty buildings that we can transform into what we call houses of creation. That's one proposal that we have, where people can play musical instruments, have, rehearsal rooms, places to read, to dance, to access technological instruments that usually, if they are poor, they will not have at their houses. And because we still have that, maybe nowadays there are no longer kids that were like me living in villages, but there are many kids living in the suburbs of Lisbon. They have never touched a violin or a cello. They have never had a computer where they can edit a movie. They have never had access to some stuff that will change their world. Europe can do that with not much money, and it will completely make tangible what we are speaking about. So, we have had the Erasmus project, a lovely, simple, nice idea that we are still talking about 30, 40 years after. Where have been these ideas so far? I think, I hope that ministers like Ernest and Agnese and future ministers like Joana and Terry will one day, in a Council of Ministers for Culture in Europe, be able to create these Erasmus projects of the future.
Thank you, Rui, and thank you also for your optimistic outlook into the professional futures of our panelists.
And like Christina, ministers like Christina as well.
Agnese, take it away. Give us an example of success.
Well, I think one of the successes on the European level is how we foster exchange between cultural professionals and cultural institutions. That is one of the powers of the European project, right? And I think the fact that the European Greens have been standing behind programs like Creative Europe, where this exchange is possible. It is a success, and this also needs to be strengthened looking ahead, because that allows for European voices to be heard among all the mass global competition. And our success story this year, the movie Flow, it won an Oscar, and it took the advantage from Creative Europe to create partnerships with other producers in Europe. So that's, I think, a success story, and we need to learn from these and to make sure that this is how we strengthen European voices.
Thank you. Ernest, take it away.
I mentioned two, but I'll be very brief. One, in terms of the role of culture in defending democracy and defending human rights, I think, and I'm being very honest here, it would have been impossible to have such a strong public opinion in Spain in support of the genocide in Gaza without all the artists and the culture in Spain mobilizing in favor of the Palestinian rights and the Palestinian people. And that is a very clear example of how culture shapes public opinion, defends democracies, and puts human rights at the center of the discussion. That was very clear in Spain. Also, by the way, in supporting Ukraine when the Russian invasion happened in Ukraine. Secondly, and this is something that Agnese and I worked together in. We insisted a lot, both of us, but also with Claudia when she was the Green Minister for Culture in Germany, that the next MFF at European level would have an increase in investment in culture. And everybody criticizes that in the EU everything goes wrong. Well, in the MFF proposal of the Commission, there's a significant increase in investment of culture. And that is good news. And that is good news, because we need investment in culture also for all this to happen. And then I will end this with a request for Terry, because the proposal of the MFF on culture is very good, but we don't want the negotiators to cut it. So now it's your role to play at the European Parliament. Go Terry, go Terry. And also them.
Pressure.
So I can only speak for Lisbon, and I think to an extent our success is caused some problems now, in the sense that during the Troika years, when Portugal for the first time didn't have a Ministry of Culture, the city of Lisbon, the municipality, really invested in culture to sort of compensate. And Lisbon, as you know, has become a very trendy, sought-after city, which has brought many problems as well, gentrification and all sorts of issues. So I would call it a mixed success. There are many other reasons for why Lisbon is where it is and how it is at the moment, but my point here was more, when you invest in culture, amazing things can happen to cities and places.
Terry. Yes, oh my God, yeah, everyone does too, so
the first one is a success story that unfortunately with the new government is not so much a success story anymore, but I want to tell it anyway because you mentioned Claudia, and Claudia as a culture minister, she managed to introduce something called Culture Pass, which is 200 euros for each 18-year-old, so each 18-year-old in Germany would get 200 euros to spend on any kind of cultural product, so books, theater, whatever you name it, and this has very notably enabled young people, especially coming from poorer backgrounds, to take part in culture. And I think because culture is not only something, you know, that is for people who have a lot of money, but culture should be something that is for everyone in society, where everyone can participate. I think this has been a fantastic project. The new government has abolished it, and we have to fight to get back. Yes. We have to fight to get back into government, because these kind of things is really where Greens can make a difference. So we have to bring the Culture Pass back, and I think we have to bring it back for all of Europe. It's a very, very beautiful story. So it's from my home region. Some of you might know I come from the Ruhr area, a coal mining area in Germany. And we go back to the winter of, I think, 46, 47. In Hamburg, all the theaters cannot play the winter season because the coal is rationed and they don't have enough coal to actually heat the theaters. So they want to play the winter season because people are so down. It's horrible, you know, the situation after the war. So they go to the Ruhr area. They go down with a, you know, some kind of van to find coal. And then they go to the area where I now live, in Recklinghausen, where there is a mine. They talk to the people who are organizing it. They talk to the trade unionists, you know, the miners. It's these theater people, actors, and they're negotiating. And then the miners say, yes, it's illegal, but we give you some coal so that you can play the winter season. So they get the coal, they do it a couple of times, they can play the winter season. It brings, you know, warmth into people's hearts. It's cultural expression. The next summer, and this is the beautiful part, they come back to Recklinghausen and they play for the first time a festival, a theater festival that is now, many, many years later, one of the biggest theater festivals in Europe. It's co-organized between the city and the trade unions. It's in the beautiful city of Recklinghausen where I now live. So I want to invite all of you. This is an expression, I think, how important culture can be. It can be as important as heat, as food. Culture is something that brings societies together. So if you have time next May, it starts on the 1st of May each year, I invite you to beautiful Recklinghausen to this wonderful theater festival.
Thank you so much for all these insights. It's been incredibly interesting. I also want to thank you for being so succinct. I know this is a very, very hard ask for any politician, so it's very much appreciated. I have an ask for you now. First of all, I want now us to join in applause for our lovely panelists. But wait, not done yet. And after that, please stay at your seat for 3 more minutes because there's still another surprise coming.